What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Okay, we had a lot of breaking news today. I've had to take some notes. I just wanted to get this out instead of wait till later today, just because obviously one of the big dominoes in the NFL, a head coaching job, has been officially filled. The New York Jets have hired Aaron Glenn. So Aaron Glenn is off the board. The Raiders have a general manager, John Spytek, Jason Licht's right-hand man down in Tampa Bay, and former Tom Brady teammate at the University of Michigan. John Spytek is the new GM. Congratulations to those two guys. Liam Cohen gets a huge raise. We have Kevin O'Connell. I guess that happened yesterday. Contract extension. Josh McDaniels back to where he always goes. So we got a lot going on, which is crazy. We'll dive in more to the football games. I don't know if you know, but there's an NFC and an AFC championship game. We'll go heavy from the gambling standpoint with Stuckey on for Friday, Fugazi Friday. I'll give some thoughts on those two games as well for Friday. This is technically Wednesday, but all thrown off. I don't even know what day it is. We will dive into those on a later show, but today about all this coaching movement, contracts, just because, it's just big story. So we will dive into it. But before we do, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners in the official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time. Do you want to go to a game? Do you want to go to any event, concert, comedy show? They got you. Do you want to go to one of these AFC or are you a Bills fan? You want to go see your team potentially go to the Super Bowl? Well, they got you covered. Are you a Commander fan? Are you an Eagle fan? Do you want to go to the Link? Heard there's a pretty big game. You right down Broad Street, baby. Philadelphia this weekend. Well, they will take care of you right now. Seat views, lowest price guarantee, their ticket coverage, their all-in pricing. It doesn't get any easier to use. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code JOHN, John, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem that code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Well, the Jets are a disaster. I mean, there's just no way around that. What has become of them the last couple years with the Zach Wilson situation, the Aaron Rodgers situation, everyone getting fired this year, it was a pretty big embarrassment. There's no way around it. Today, it felt like the first time in a long time, just some normality. Just a moment where you'd be like, okay, that feels normal. That feels like a good thing. And if you're a New York Jets fan, there hasn't been much of that for a long period of time. Honestly, the last couple years couldn't have sucked anymore. From the moment he ran out with the American flag and five plays later ripped his Achilles, to this year with everyone getting fired and the team just being a joke, I feel for you guys. Listen, if you're an NFL fan and your team sucks, it is a long season. But when your team is an embarrassment and the things you're doing are being reported on to levels in which the Jets were getting reported on, it has to be a really, really awful feeling as a fan. And when you hire Aaron Glenn, who is a guy that you drafted once upon a time, who played for your franchise from 1994 to 2001, so he played for Bill Parcells. Bill Belichick was there as an assistant coach. He played a year for Pete Carroll. Like, he worked for Sean Payton. He obviously worked for Dan Campbell these last 4 years in Detroit. Just feels like we made the right move. We just made a move that wasn't just easy. It was, we get a guy who just potentially knows what he's doing. Because we have gone a long time in New York where it feels like that's been the case. You could say early on when they hired Robert Saleh, everyone was very excited. But then the moment they got Zach Wilson, it just kind of derailed everyone's plans. And I think in this situation, you just get to start from scratch with one of your own. And one thing that was clear in the Robert Saleh era, felt like he was a little over his head talking to the press. Like, clearly he's a good defensive mind and a solid leader, and guys like him. They played really, really hard for him. But in terms of talking, and especially once Aaron Rodgers got there, he was always having to uh, basically come back from previous comments. And it was just like a dog chasing his tail, running in circles. And it was like, this is not a sustainable thing to do. And I think the element in New York of being able to handle what people in the 90s would have called the press, what I just call modern day society of social media, of the intensity of it all, of the internet, is an element that a former player who was a really good player is going to be much more accustomed and equipped to handling. So I think from that element, you just get a guy who's been used to the bright lights. Why? He's been a player for a long time. Then you get a guy who's proved his stripes as a DB coach under Sean Payton, where their defense was really damn good when Dennis Allen took over, and Aaron Glenn was on the staff. And then he went to Detroit, and this year, the masterpiece he had in that Week 18 against Kevin O'Connell, playing with me, you, and 8 other guys, or 9 other guys, I can't do math, was Aaron Glenn's a high-level cat. And you saw in his interview during the week of the Washington game when he's getting peppered about questions, and he said, listen, I'm not a defensive coach. I will speak to the offense just as much as the defense. I'm a football coach. And I think that's what the Jets are getting. Now, you never know in this world. It's no different than draft picks. It's a risk. You're dealing with human beings. How you're going to handle going from being a coordinator to being a head coach. But Aaron Glenn's a really, really impressive guy. And I think this was one, the Jets are lucky that he wanted to take the job. Because let's face it, it's a pretty toxic place. Now, bright lights, big market, talent on the roster, especially on defense. So from Aaron Glenn's standpoint, when you're a defensive coach, you never know when your opportunities are going to come. I mean, he's had a front row seat of Ben Johnson turning people down for multiple years. For him, I mean, it took year 4 of them being the #1 seed and him doing this with a bunch of practice squad guys, with him even to get some interviews. So I congrats to Aaron Glenn, congrats to the Jets, and most importantly, congrats to Jets fans. It just feels like, okay, like I said earlier this year, I thought they were going to go with Rex Ryan. And I think a big reason I thought that was I didn't think anyone was going to take the job. And I thought Rex desperately wanted it. You know Rex can handle being a head coach, one, and you know Rex can handle the bright lights and the market. I don't know if Aaron Glenn can handle becoming a head coach. You never know that. But you know he can handle the bright lights, and you know the market won't be too big. And you know he can handle players. And I think in this world of 2025, having guys that understand players and being able to deal with them, that does not mean kiss their ass. That does not mean give them a reach around every day. That does not mean treat them like this is the NBA, because that's not. That's not the way this business works. But there is a balance of being the old school guy from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the way the game was always coached, and the shift just the way younger people operate. And he clearly gets it. So, big move. We'll have to wait and see. As of recording this, I don't know who the GM is, but this was a big, big hire. And now we have, we know everybody in the AFC East, right? You obviously got Sean McDermott in the Bills. You got Mike Vrabel in the Patriots. You got Mike McDaniel in the Miami Dolphins. And now you have Aaron Glenn. So some pretty accomplished guys, guys with impressive resumes. And now we'll just have to see how Aaron Glenn handles a situation where, part of being a head coach is, as an assistant, you manage up a little bit, but you just deal with the head coach. But you're not dealing that much with the owner. I mean, even the GM goes through the head coach to get to you of anything like quote unquote controversial, like if he has disagreements. But you're doing a lot of managing down. As the head coach, you deal so much with the owner. And probably the Jets have to be on the short list of places where you deal with the owner the most. And it's well reported his children are involved. And I don't blame those kids. If I were Woody Johnson's kids, I'd be involved as well. But that's part of the gig here. And, it's just a highly picked apart gig. And it's intense. And it's why I thought Robert Saleh was really over his head. It was just, and Joe Douglas's personality is not really that, and it was just a tough spot for him. Aaron Glenn's like, bring it fucking on. So I'm excited to watch this. NFL playoffs. We're talking about the NFL playoffs. You bet we are. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook. an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Scoring touchdowns is a key to winning in the NFL playoffs. And the key to you scoring big is betting on them at DraftKings, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something as simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Here's another reason to watch your favorite players crush it in the playoffs. New customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big during the NFL playoffs with the DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use the code JOHN, J-O-H-N. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. The other hire today was the Raiders hired John Spytek, who actually, when I got hired by the Eagles, had just left the year previously. So a lot of people I work with know him really well. I wouldn't say that I know him that well. I definitely know him. He knows who I am, but I don't pretend to have a relationship with him. Everyone I know and that I'm close with in the NFL that works with him or that had worked with him really likes him. Obviously, Jason Light, who is one of the better GMs in the NFL, he's been his right-hand man for a long time, and they clearly draft and build a team at a pretty high level in Tampa Bay. So I think the Raiders, John Spytek was a freshman. He played at Michigan, was a freshman, might have been there 2 years, definitely was there 1 year with Tom Brady. So they not only know each other from their Michigan days, he was obviously with Tampa Bay when Tom played. So the Tom influence is really kind of showing itself here. He wanted Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson turned him down. He brings in a Michigan guy. But this is a Michigan guy, like myself, started at the lowest person on the totem pole with the Eagles and Andy Reid in 2005. Worked his way up, got in with Jason Light, went around with him, and obviously has spent time in Denver, spent time in Cleveland with the late Tom Heckert, and obviously has been in Tampa for a long time. So this is a guy with a lot of experience. He's seen a lot of different places. He's been in Tampa and Philly where they've had a lot of success, where they've won at a really high clip. And he's been in places that were kind of a disaster. So I like guys that have a lot of experience. I would say the same thing for Aaron Glenn. Glenn's been a player. He's played for a million coaches. He's been an assistant coach on teams that are really good, the Lions, the Saints. He also was there when they showed up in Detroit, and they were a joke. So I like guys that, that's the thing with Josh McDaniels. Like, he only excels one place. All he knows is like the Belichick tree answering to Robert Kraft. You get him out of that environment, it is a tire fire. Aaron Glenn, John Spytek, they've seen it all. That means you have a lot of different experience. You know a lot of different people. You can relate experiences to, 10 years ago when I was in place X, I remember when this guy had an issue with his girlfriend. Very similar to this. I think we dealt with it like this. We should do it again. Or we tried to do this in this situation. It backfired. We got to take a different tactic. I think Aaron Glenn and John Spytek can bring that to the table because of all the different things they've seen. And listen, a lot like Aaron Glenn, this is a very difficult job. This is not an easy place to work. The Jets and the Raiders are where people go, one, to get paid a lot of money and to quickly get fired. So, part of life is taking risks, taking calculated risks. Not sure John Spytek would have taken this job if Tom Brady didn't exist. He clearly has to feel a lot more comfortable having Tom Brady around. But I said the same thing about Ben Johnson. When John Spytek moves his family to Vegas and lives in a suite pad and goes to that incredible practice facility, it's a booming area. Vegas, Scottsdale, these fucking areas are on the come. But you still go into the office and Mark Davis is there every day. Like that's still a reality. And I would say the same thing about the team here in Arizona. Like when Jonathan Gannon and the staff go in every day, Michael Bidwell is the guy there. Like those are the guys you answer to. That is who you have to overcome. And the Raiders now flush with cash, stadium suite, no quarterback. So Tom Brady is a huge part of your life and you swear by him. And I don't blame anyone if Tom Brady sells you on something, you listening to him and you following him. That would be a smart move. I would do the same thing. But Tom is not in that office every day. And during the fall, when you're working and grinding for the season, Tom's calling games. So until he quits that, and I saw he told Cowher today he has no plans to quit that, his role in technology. And listen, I can run a podcast with people living in DC and Jersey and all over the place. It doesn't matter. The world's changed. There's something to be said when you go into if you have a true office job like being a GM and being a head coach is like the people that are the people that are there, and Mark Davis is there. So that is something that under Mark Davis's watch, the resume speaks for itself. Uh, I'm fascinated to watch who John Spytek hires in this situation because obviously that will be big, and how big of a leash Mark Davis gives this man, right? Does he give him just 5, 6 years to just kind of run what he's learned from all these other guys? Does he give him opportunity if he can't hire a great coach right now because it's not a great job to hire a second coach? Look at Houston. They realized when Nick Casario took over that job and Bill O'Brien left was one of the worst jobs we've ever seen. No one would touch that job with a 10-foot pole. So we had to hire guys that no one would have ever hired, like David Culley, nice guy, has no business being a coordinator, let alone a head coach. Lovey Smith, who had been good a decade ago, it's just shouldn't be your head coach. And then he gets D'Amico, and then they're a real team. But he let him get two coaches that he had to hire because no one would take the job. And it'll be interesting to see what happens here with the Raiders. If they fall in a situation like that for a year, Mark Davis is paying a ton of people, a ton of people. I mean, listen, the Crafts have become pretty controversial since Belichick has left. But even when Belichick was there, they used to hire people who were being paid by other people a lot. They love doing that. Josh McDaniels is still owed several years by the Raiders. And Josh McDaniels, I'm pretty sure, signed a 6 year, $10 million a year contract. $60 million. So the Patriots can offer him like the league minimum given his experience. And the Raiders are paying the majority of his money. So they don't have to pay him like $3, $4, $5 million. And when you see Josh McDaniels going back with Vrabel, and I read this article that Diana Rossini wrote on The Athletic, the Spytek thing makes sense. Spytek knows Brady. Has a huge influence. Mark Davis needs his help. This one, Rossini reported that Vrabel and Josh McDaniels don't have like some close relationship. When he was a player, Josh was like a young assistant, and a coordinator for a year before he bounced to Denver. But it's not like they were boys. They've never worked together. This does feel a little bit like the Crafts who love Josh McDaniels and knowing that he's cheap. So I'm a pro Vrabel guy. And listen, Josh has been excellent as a coordinator, clearly as a head coach. I mean, he's one of the worst head coaches we've ever seen in the history of the sport. I think he's the only guy to be fired by multiple teams and not make either past the middle of year two. So, like, what his resume is as a head coach is unprecedented. But Mike Vrabel, I don't know. You would think, and I understand going back to the well with Mike Vrabel, though Mike Vrabel never coached for Bill. He just played there. And when you look at Mike Vrabel, the people that worked for him, like he had guys like Arthur Smith and Matt LaFleur were his assistant coaches on offense. So I just wonder, like, how much are the Crafts still very, very involved? There is an element with the Crafts and Jerry Jones that, like, they might not tell you on a daily basis everything to do, but they are extremely involved. And I mean extremely involved. There are some teams when you show up to the office, you just might not see the owner all week. I remember when I worked for the Eagles, you sometimes see Jeffrey Lurie, sometimes you wouldn't. Sometimes you just see him walking down to Andy's office. Sometimes you just wouldn't even notice him for weeks beside at the game. When you take the Jets job, you are going to see Woody Johnson a lot. When you take the Raiders job, you are going to see Mark Davis a lot. Vrabel and the Crafts, and obviously they have a good relationship, and so does Josh with them. Those guys are around constantly, right? When you, it's just a huge part of what you're signing up for. And like, I understand it does feel. Can Josh McDaniels coach any other place? Like, are there any other teams where he can be an assistant coach and have success? It feels a little weird constantly going back to the well. It really does. Like, I think about it. Like, I understand. Like Kurt Warner. Kurt Warner the other day said that he thought that outdoor games in the elements, all games should be able to be played in controlled environments. I was like, of course Kurt Warner would say that. He's a dome quarterback. And I don't mean that as a slight, like he's a Hall of Famer and had just some incredible moments, but think about his success. St. Louis in a dome, Arizona in a dome. I saw when he went to New York. It was pretty ugly. Not really Mr. Outdoor, right? It'd be like if you ask me, like, what do you like better, radio or podcast? I'll probably gonna say podcast. So we all got an agenda and we all got a bias. So I get if you're Josh McDaniels, you feel very comfortable there. You would say the best years of your life have been with the New England Patriots. But isn't part of being a coach being able to go place to place and do some different things? So when I see that Josh McDaniels goes back there, I go, my first question is like, this is who Vrabel wanted? This is 100% who he wanted. Maybe it is, but I just wonder if the Krafts are involved. Like clearly, Tom Brady wanted John Spytek. The Jets wanted Aaron Glenn, right? Or definitely when the process started, one of the coordinators, Ben Johnson, wouldn't even talk to them. Aaron Glenn, being a defensive guy, had to be a little open minded. He wanted to become a head coach. Good hire. This one, like the Vrabel thing, totally get it. Josh McDaniels, that's his coordinator. It's just, I don't know. Something's just weird about that with me. Something that's not weird. We knew this when it came out. Is when the story leaked, not even a leak, reported from Jay Glazer that teams were going to trade for Kevin O'Connell. I went, that's a giant red flag. Like, I understand the conversation around Mike Tomlin. It feels like it's peaked 5 years ago. The same thing happens over and over. Of course, anyone worth their salt that needs a coach is going to call the Steelers and be like, hey, Tomlin available? Could we trade for him? Like, that's not a crazy story. Even if, like me, I just threw it out there when the story actually came to fruition, like you could just see it coming. When it's like teams are interested in trading for Kevin O'Connell. Well, think about this. If you're the Jets, you think Minnesota is going to trade Kevin O'Connell? Probably not. So who would want that out? Well, Kevin O'Connell's camp. Why? Because like I'm tired of making $6-7 million. I'm ready to be paid like a guy winning 12 to 14 games, which the going rate is 14 to $15 million. I want a race. And I thought, listen, I'm pro Kevin O'Connell. He seems like a good coach, even though he gets a little pass happy. You know, sometimes these coaches, they can be really hypocritical because the team, stay banded as brothers, lock arms. We're in this together through the good and the bad. And it's like, you're no different than the players. You're tired of making $7 million. You want 15. Look at Ben Johnson. Like, coaches are much closer to mercenaries like the players than anyone ever discusses. Ben Johnson, as an assistant coach, does not have the same stock in the franchise as Dan Campbell. He has no ambition of coaching anywhere else. He's the head coach. As the players under contract, St. Brown, Goff, Penei Sewell, Jahmyr Gibbs, Aiden Hutchinson, Brian Branch, like those guys are in it with the Lions. That's their team. That's where they're going to get second contracts. Like they are Lions. Ben Johnson is like a hired gun, essentially, because all these teams are coming at him and eventually he's going to leave. It's why 3 days after the loss, he's happier than a pig in shit. You see how smiley he is running around the Bears organization? Imagine me and Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, who probably have slept a total of 10 hours in the last 3 games. Jared Goff, with the little concussion he's got, has probably been in shambles. I saw St. Brown on his podcast. You could tell he was pissed. Ben Johnson looks like he just hit the fucking lottery. It's just, sometimes these coaches can be really hypocritical when they preach like the Bo Schembechler, the team, the team, the team. Well, as long as they're paying me a premium. Because if they're not, then I'm going to leak stories that are going to make it uncomfortable for them, which is fine as business, right? But at least us in like sports stuff, we could just be cutthroat. Like, this is what it's going to cost if you want to do business. If not, see you later. Nice meeting you. Nice doing business with you. It's just very black and white. We're in those type jobs, you got to be very political. And he says, come in the press, like, this is where I want to be. Well, this is where you want to be as long as they'll pay you. So just embrace it. You're no different than Justin Jefferson or a guy that like, hey, I'm not practicing until I get paid. It's essentially your version of doing that. Ben Johnson, like, and listen, I never said or thought that he mailed it in. They had a bye week. During the bye week, they don't even know who they're playing. They can basically play any team, from 4 to 7. So it's not like he's game planning against every team. His game plan really starts on Monday. But I just think it's funny when these assistants. It's one thing if Ben Johnson had been hired by the Raiders or by the Jags, like there's no different conference. You play the Lions once every 4 years. He went to the Bears. He went to the fucking Bears. So I just think it's that always makes me laugh. It's not like I'm against it. I don't blame him for taking the job. But imagine being like one of the dudes on the team where he's always preaching his coach speak. It's like, bro, was that all just coach speak? It's like, yeah, it kind of is. That's kind of the business we're all in. Um, so Kevin O'Connell gets an extension. The Cowboys, I think it's pretty clear that when Black Monday happened and that week and Mike McCarthy didn't get quote unquote fired, Jerry Jones thought he could take advantage of the situation. Jerry Jones thought he had him by the balls, thought he had him bent over the desk. And then Mike looked around at some of these jobs and thought, well, I'll go get the Bears job. I'll go get the Jets job. I'll get hired as a head coach. So my educated guess on this situation is Jerry thought he'd get him back for like, I'll give you like a 2 year extension. Like he's like a guard. Hey, I'll give you 2 years, $18 million. Come back. And he thought Mike would just say yes because he thought he wouldn't have any options. Then Mike looks around and goes, I'm going to keep kissing this old man's ass. He's going to take advantage of me. Why don't I just go get another job that gives me 4 or 5 years guaranteed? And so Mike kind of called Jerry's bluff. He said no. And I think Jerry was shocked. I think Jerry assumed because if Jerry didn't, why wouldn't Jerry have just fired him on Monday? It made no sense. The Cowboys had known for weeks their season was over. They had known since last year Mike McCarthy's contract was up. Jerry thought he could take advantage of the situation. Jerry thought he could win the deal. And then Mike said, kick rocks. Now it looks like Mike potentially is going to get shut out of this. Maybe he takes the Saints job. But even if he takes Saints job, I think what he would say is, yeah, it's a worse job than the Cowboys, but they just gave me, 4 years, $40 million. Jerry's offering me a 2 year contract when I know that he'll gladly fire me after the next season. So I said, screw you. So maybe Mike will be proven right when this is all said and done. But I think Jerry kind of screwed up here. And I think he misplayed his hand. And now when I read headlines that he's interviewing Brian Schottenheimer, in what world does it make sense to fire, let Mike McCarthy walk, and hire his number two? I can't even fathom that. A guy that's never been a head coach. And this completely shows you that Jerry, one of the great deal makers in the history of the league, might have lost his fastball. And age is catching up to him. And I don't care. It happens to us all at different points in time in our life. This is his version, but I think he's kind of going through it. I think he's kind of turned into Al Davis here of 2006, 2007, 2008. And he's kind of lost control of even elements that he used to have control over. And listen, Jerry's always going to be in control till he dies. He's going to be the GM. Obviously, he's the owner, but it's like everything runs through him. And as long as he still has his marbles upstairs, he can pull that off. But I think he used to be a little slyer and have a deep. Now, he's always been probably more loyal than some of these owners in the league to his people. He definitely was to Jason Garrett. And I think he thought of trying to be somewhat to Mike McCarthy. But I think this situation, he's just upstream without a paddle. And he's just kind of floating. And I don't think he knows what to do. I think when this situation broke down with Mike McCarthy, he did not have a game plan. Because I think his game plan all along was to take advantage of Mike McCarthy. Who knows? Maybe get him for like 2 years, $15 million. Basically, just extend the current contract that he was on. And he just thought Mike, because he's coaching the Cowboys, and it's one of the biggest jobs in all of sports, would be like, yeah, I'll keep doing it. Family likes living here. No state income tax. If we're healthy, we should have a competitive team. I'll stay. And Mike essentially said no. Now Jerry's never going to let it out that Jerry acts like he's the one that said no. But I mean, just start putting the pieces of the puzzle together. I think it's pretty easy to add this thing up and go, Jerry was playing poker, and I'm not a big poker guy, I'm more of a blackjack guy, but he got aggressive. Let's use the blackjack analogy, and he hit. When the guy was showing a four, and you had a 13, you're like, I'm going to get aggressive here because he's had some 4 or 5 card 20s and 21s. I'm going to hit on this even though the number shouldn't, and I get a king and I bust. Like that's what it feels like a little bit here. He got aggressive and it busted right in his face. No pun intended, obviously. Uh, well, maybe. I mean, you Googled some of Jerry's pictures back in the day with some young ladies. But man, I just think the Cowboys, if you're a fan, huge win right now. Eagles feel pretty stable. Their version of it is always a little chaotic. Obviously, Washington, like, we know what we're doing. Like, those two teams got to be looking at the Cowboys like, I pray you hire Brian Schottenheimer. I really do. And listen, everyone acts like Brian Schottenheimer's the village idiot because Russell Wilson situation. Every coach that ever worked for Russell Wilson got fired. Every single one. Hackett all the way through the Seattle guys. So, and reports came out that Arthur Smith and him couldn't stand each other. So let's not act like Russell Wilson's Peyton Manning here. But I remember Brian Schottenheimer took a lot of crap for his situation with Russell Wilson. That actually aged better. But to make him your head coach, that seems like insanity. Like, listen, I can think the Josh McDaniels thing's a little weird and a craft creation, but like I'm not arguing like it's a bad hire. Like it's not a crazy hire. Like, yeah, he's worked with, just in recent memory, he made Mac Jones functional. So you take Drake May, who has more talent in his right leg than Mac Jones has in his entire body. Like I get it. Aaron Glenn, Spytech, those make sense. Kevin O'Connell extension makes sense, right? Uh, it'll be fast. I don't know what Detroit's going to do. Detroit's in a weird spot. You lose your offensive coordinator, you lose your defensive coordinator. Ideally, you just want to keep doing the same things. Do they have another guy that he feels comfortable elevating? Because remember, when he fired Anthony Lynn that first year, he made himself the offensive coordinator, I think, toward the end of the season. And then the next year, he just made Ben Johnson the coordinator, who was on his staff. So is there a guy on his staff that can be the offensive coordinator? Is there a guy on the staff that can be his defensive coordinator? They lost their D line coach today. Obviously, they lost Aaron Glenn. I don't know. But these are tough spots. Sometimes you just have a guy. Best case scenario, you have a guy. You fire Anthony Lynn, you elevate Ben Johnson, it works out. Saw it with the 49ers. Robert Saleh got a job. They elevated D'Amico Ryans. Well, then D'Amico Ryans gets a job. Ben Johnson gets a job. Sometimes you're looking around, you're like, I don't feel comfortable making any of these guys the offensive coordinator. But I don't want to bring a guy outside who doesn't quite know what we do. So you get in this weird spot. Now, luckily for Dan Campbell, he's had a pretty good idea. Both these guys are going to become head coaches, I would say, before the season even started, especially on offense. Like Ben Johnson, I would say last off season, it was pretty clear this was going to be his last off season with the Lions. So a lot going on in the football world, man. It's crazy. Once the games stop, I mean, there's two games left, but usually during a season, when you have however many games on a given week, 12 to 14, we got Thursday night game, there's just a lot of football stuff happening. Like, what is Dan Quinn, Sirianni, and Andy and McDermott really saying on Wednesday? This stuff kind of fills that void during the playoffs on like Tuesday and Wednesday of just like, and then by Thursday and Friday, you're kind of in like, okay, what's the injury status of the Chiefs, of the Bills, of the Eagles? What's Jalen saying? How's Sirianni? Like Andy, Andy and McDermott aren't exactly like saying crazy things. Uh, so yeah, it's an exciting week and glad it happened in the middle of the day.